This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. Ted wants me to do a song and dance routine every time I do this introduction, which he's not going to get. So
if Sean is too monotone for your ears, let us know.
I like to think of my timbre as soothing and it kind of relaxes the audience and prepares them to be overwhelmed with amounts of beneficial information that we're about to give them.
A good voice for yacht rock radio.
Inflation, yeah. you could say I have a voice for radio, to relax and chill. I could be Florida Beach right now. That's where you could be. But sadly, they keep changing the base year of the CPI index, and you'll never get there. No. Just kidding.
Right. This episode is on inflation on the wealth side or the finances side, and isometrics on the fitness side.
So shout outs for today. We have a lot from our various fantasy football leagues, but just for giving us good questions for episode 99 and for listening to the podcast. So we got Ryan C and Ryan H, the two Pats, Pat H and Pat R, Joey, Jack, Graham, Blaze, Reagan, Riley, and Chris.
Thank you guys for helping out with episode 99. Hope you enjoyed that one with Casey. Moving on to the wealth wisdom, Sean. You want to get us?
Yeah. So the only way to beat inflation is with buying assets. So if you're putting your money in a savings account and hoping that is going to retire you, you're probably wrong. If this will be interesting to you guys, and this is why I wanted to have my cousin on this podcast, and we're going to invite him out here soon, but he invited me to a discussion next week, I want to say on the Sunday. It's a late Terry Sunday. It's the Sunday before Palm Sunday. Yeah. We're having not necessarily a debate, but a discussion on the topic of whether investing in your 401k is it moral to invest in a 401k? Because you are not picking the companies, and therefore, like Coca-Cola, and there are immoral practices that these companies do, and if you are buying them, you are providing funding for these immoral practices.
Yeah, like, do you want to be investing in Pfizer?
Yeah,
yeah, that's it.
So it's like it's kind of an interesting topic, right? And like even like the even buying an overvalued stock and then maybe it gains 20%, but the company hasn't done anything. It's a zombie corporation, and it's just a price race to the top with no actual value created. Is it moral to then, sell it off to some poor guy who doesn't know that it's overvalued and just thinks that it's going through the roof?
That guy might think that it's not overvalued. I don't want to assume people's
that's
beliefs.
It's part of the bubble. We talked on another episode about how, I think it might have been episode 100, like the last bubble with the 2008 financial crisis was residential housing, and how the mortgages were all jumbled up into these junk bonds, or what was it? Junk, whatever.
Yeah, it's Class A, Class B.
Yeah. But it looks like the next bubble could be all this investment going into these zombie corporations where they're not actually turning a profit, and that's in part from the ZIRP policy with the low interest rates, with then the investment firms investing in companies and giving them a lot of money, even though they're not turning a profit. And then also with
those zombie corporations being in the S&P 500, which you brought up, where it's like once you're in the S&P 500, you're kind of good,
But the S&P 500 does change out a lot.
Yeah, something drastic would have to happen though for you to get out.
But people buy
it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, the average company that makes the S&P 500 only stays there for like 15 years. I think it's like 14 years is the average. Like the S&P 500 does have a lot of turnover. Not like immediately, not every year, but it's very hard to stay in the S&P 500 for a long period of time.
Yeah, but people also are buying you solely because you're in the S&P 500, not because they know anything about your company.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a, it's the blue check
Yeah, but to your point about buying like moral, I mean, I know this isn't what the episode's about, but to buy,
But it's
buying
an
moral
interesting topic,
companies,
you know?
Yeah, there are mutual funds out there that, you know, invest or like have like a ethical part of their portfolio where they only invest in companies that don't do X or that only do X.
We should start a Christian mutual fund where we only invest in companies that have good Christian morals.
Yeah.
They exist.
They do, yeah.
All right, moving on to the intro article for this episode. We have an article, The Great Cousin Decline, by Faith Hill. It was in The Atlantic, and it talks a lot about how...
It's Ted's favorite magazine.
Not true. But I thought this was a good article. It touches on how not only have the number of cousins that people are having declining as family sizes decrease, but also people are a lot further away from their cousins. So people have less cousins and less contact with their cousins that they do have. So there were some really interesting stats in this article, and we'll have a quick discussion on it. We're not going to read the whole article, but a couple stats I thought were interesting were only about 6% of cousins live in the same census tract. In a city, that would be like a large neighborhood. In a suburban area, that would be like a big section of your town or whatever. And then in a more rural area, that would be like a town plus for a census tract. So only about 6% of people live in the same census tract as their cousins. And the average amongst the other 94% of people, the average distance from each person to their cousin is, 237 miles.
Yeah, that's pretty far.
Yeah, it's pretty far. And then this has a lot of different effects on people mentally and their relationships with their family and their sense of community and loneliness. We can go over, I guess, like how we grew up with our cousins and then kind of our thoughts on it. But
yeah, I mean, for me, my dad's whole side was all in Illinois. Probably like we weren't like within the same census tract. Like grandma and grandpa lived the town over from us. And then our closest cousins were like a 45-minute drive. And then once my Uncle John moved out of Chicago, he moved probably an hour away into like more rural Illinois. The other family members also kind of they're all kind of more rural than my dad and grandfather. And they've only moved farther away as Illinois has continued to kind of go down. Stonks are going down in Illinois. It's not great. And I think for like my immediate family, I have 5 sisters. Like I don't see any of them being in Illinois long term. Like there's a couple of them who might, with the profession, but like one for sure is in Minnesota permanently. Another one, the other 4 sisters, we don't know where they're going to be, but Illinois is probably low on the list. So like for at least like for my son, we don't know where his cousins are going to be.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I grew up in a pretty unique situation compared to most people, where from our front door we could see one of our cousins' back door, and then from our back door we could see our other cousin's front door. So on my dad's side, we were all extremely close, and there's 8 of us within 6 years. So we basically grew up almost as brothers and sisters, which was amazing. And I'm so grateful for it, and our family is so close because of it. And then our grandparents were only 25 minutes away. So we would see our entire family all the time. And then on my mom's side, they were all in New England, but we would see them all 2-3 times a year, usually, if not more. So still close with them as well compared to a lot of people. And I feel like it just gives having a big family like that, not just your immediate family, but your cousins and your grandparents, having that like sense of community is just so valuable, and it helps you build traditions, and holidays become like a bigger thing in your family. And I think it's so valuable. So like my 3 brothers and sister and we have always said like we want to grow up we want our children to grow up that way. So we'll see what happens. Like my parents left New York and moved away from the family, which was a big shock to the family. But New York is just so bad.
Yeah, so it's like that's kind of a tough position to be in, because it's like, do you value family and you put a millstone around your neck
Yeah.
to have that, or do you save your own and get out?
Yeah, which my parents also moved to Charleston from like the Philadelphia area. And so I don't have that many cousins. I have 6 cousins and 7 siblings. So more siblings than cousins. Only 2 sets. So on my mom's side, they're in Philadelphia. And then growing up, the cousins on my dad's side were in Minnesota, but they're in North Carolina now.
So a lot closer now.
Yeah, a lot closer. But I mean, I probably saw them like 2 or 3 times a year on my mom's side, and then my dad's side, I've only probably in my life I'd say 8-10 times, or so. Just because I mean, like they were so far away.
Yeah. So not strangers, but this article talks about how a lot of people's cousins are near like stranger type relationship, which I think is a shame. So I know with people leaving California, with like the mass exodus, a lot of people that want to leave California don't, because their whole family is there. So it's a hard decision to make. And then also as siblings get married, like that has a big effect too, because if you marry someone, maybe you move to where they're from.
Yeah. The general trend is, you move to where like the husband's from.
Yeah. More often. Yeah.
Yeah.
More often than not. That's what happens.
I feel like my kids' cousins will probably grow up closer, because I see most of my siblings staying in the Charleston area. So they should grow up with a lot of cousins. But I mean, like my brother's already in Florida, so I don't know if he's going to move back.
Yeah. You never know.
Yeah.
It's a tough scenario, because it's like, the American economy is so prone to like relocation and stuff, especially like our generation. Like I don't know a ton of guys who are staying at the same firm. Like my father-in-law joined a firm out of college and worked there for almost 39 years.
Yeah, the average person used to stay at their company, like with the boomers, for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And now the average that people stay at a job with millennials and Gen Z is like 2 or 3 years.
Which I'm
constantly moving.
Because I'm on my 3rd job already, and the first 2 places were both about 2 years.
Yeah, just within accounting, you're in your 3rd different job.
So yeah.
It's but that's just how the labor market is right now. It's like,
because it pays to switch.
Yeah,
like, you tend to get a bigger bump when you switch,
which is unfortunate, and it's. I think we'll start to see businesses incentivize people more and more to stay with them.
Yeah, the internal promotions versus bringing in some from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more economical too, because to pay a recruiter, I think they usually charge around 30 to 35% of first year salary. So you get someone who's going to make $100K, you have to pay like $30,000 to acquire them.
Yeah, but I mean, recruiters are it's a tough business model. It's like just post your job.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't think like when I end up hunting for a job, I don't think I'm going to hire a recruiter.
Yeah. Moving on to a similar topic. I guess we're doing a family heavy intro here. Let's talk about youth travel sports. I think youth travel sports are degrading the culture and the communities within the U.S. because especially with like weekend travel, like people aren't staying in their town, in their neighborhood on the weekends with travel sports, and travel sports kind of become the main activity for the family. And so they're not home on Sundays to go to church or be like involved in community events and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know at least when I was playing baseball, like a long trip would be like an hour or like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But now it seems like my parents are in Atlanta or Charlotte every other weekend with one of my sisters playing volleyball or soccer.
Yeah.
Or, which is
my little sister's like,
plus.
she's going to like Florida.
Yeah.
Illinois. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And I don't think like travel baseball on like the regional level like that, that's different. Like you drive to a town an hour away and you like play someone from another county. That's very different than, going to, the other side of the country.
Yeah.
So I don't think like regional travel is at nearly at the same level of like actually degrading U.S. culture, maybe like nationwide, but that's also kind of a result of, just college and stuff, because a lot of these people are looking at like sports as a way to pay for college, because college is so expensive. And if you're not like going to be valedictorian, you need to get like an athletic scholarship of some type to defray the costs of going to school if you want to go to school.
Yeah.
So,
but like a lot of kids that play travel sports are not going to be a really good athlete.
But they might go like NAIA or something like that. You go D3 and you get 10 grand off tuition for playing a sport, that adds up. That's 40 grand off the cost of college.
Yeah, but it's also the age, because like one of my sisters is in 6th grade and like they go all over the place, and it's like, I'm sure like she could develop in that sport just as well, just playing like local.
Well, how many of the kids that are playing travel sports spend hours each week on their own practicing their skills? Because like that would have a bigger payoff than just playing better competition by like traveling,
which they don't really.
Yeah, a lot of them don't spend all that time. So like, I think if your kid isn't spending a lot of time on their own practicing the skills because they're obsessed with the sport and they love it, then like maybe travel isn't worth it. Never mind. I had a good segue based off something Sean said, but I forget it.
The inflationary pressure of college.
Yes, the inflationary pressure of college. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So with how much college has inflated, that gets us into inflation for this episode.
Yeah. Nick, if you want to bring us through a couple of the causes.
Yeah. So, I mean,
stuff.
there are a lot of factors that go into inflation. And, there are different weights to them, and some can be more prominent at certain times than others. But they all do contribute in some way. Recently, the biggest one has been the increase to the money supply. I mean, if there's more money out there and like the same amount of product being produced, the cost is going to go up just because there's more money going around. People have more money.
What was the stat during COVID? It was something along the lines of like 40% of the dollars in circulation had been printed in the year or two after COVID started. I think it was around 40%. It was something crazy.
Yeah.
Which, like, how are you not going to create massive amounts of inflation?
Right.
And that was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I wasn't like a big Trump supporter, even though I liked some of his policies. Like, he did create a lot of inflation that we saw during the Biden presidency because of how much money they printed at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, all the stimulus checks and the PPP, like quote unquote loans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just had to do a quick search because I remember seeing this during COVID, but under Regulation D, like the Fed removed. If you guys remember back in the day, it used to be like you can only move money out of your savings account like 6 times or something. They removed that during COVID, so it essentially turned all savings accounts into checking accounts, which drastically increased the money supply right there.
Yeah.
Some banks still enforce it, but it's not like it's no longer a rule that they have to do that. So
so the two main increases for the money supply are, one, the government can print more money, or the reserve policy that banks have, which we talked about in a recent episode, that it's zero.
Yeah. That's at the federal level. So banks can still have like an internal reserve requirement, but it's no longer like a required thing. And here I have the deposit multiplier here. So the deposit multiplier is the inverse of the percentage of required reserves, right? So if the reserve requirement is 20%, the deposit multiplier is 5. It's calculated just dividing 1 by the percentage, right? So if for every $1 a bank has in reserves, it is able to increase deposits and theoretically the money supply by $5.
Right.
Through what it lends.
And then this also is on top of the amount that the government prints. So if the government prints $100, it creates like $500 in that example.
Yeah, and since the federal level money or reserve requirement is 0, it's pretty much infinite.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, and then we can talk about some statistics about how inflation has increased over the years. We just have like a lot of examples, equalizing salaries between certain years. So the first one we have is 2015 to 2025. So if you were making 100,000 in 2015, you'd have to make 138,000 now to have the same standard of living. And then
a massive increase over 10 years.
Right.
Like, who's gotten a $40,000 raise over the last 10 years?
Right. And that's largely because of like the compounding effect of inflation. So, if inflation is 7% year over year, you're going to see a larger increase than 14% than simply adding them together. And year over year, that starts to make a big difference. And then also from 2015 to 2025, if you're making 100,000 now, that's equal to making 73,000 in 2020 or in 2015.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
And then you have 1982, 32 grand, if I'm reading this correctly, is equivalent to 100K right now.
Right. So if you were making 32,000 in 1982, and you would have to make 100,000 right now to have the same living.
Yeah, and 100,000 in 1982 is equivalent to 320.
Yeah. So when people talk about making $100,000 in like, which we were talking about this beforehand, in the movies growing up, that doesn't really hold true today. Same with being a millionaire.
Yeah.
It's like 3 or 4 million now.
Yeah.
He's required to have the same level of affluence. And then you have 1990, 100K back then would require 250 now, right? And 40 grand back then is 100 grand now. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So like if you're a younger person who's kind of just starting out, and your parents are like, oh, like 60 grand's not bad, wow. It's like, okay, well, it's it's very different.
Yeah. And then one thing I also want to talk about is during COVID, there was like the word transitory being thrown around a lot with inflation. Where it's temporary and like it's not going to continue at this rate. But that doesn't mean that it's ever going that it's going to deflate. It's not going to go back to what it used to be. It just means the rate that it increases is going down.
Yeah.
So like that inflation is permanent.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing at Baker Tilly because I was there during COVID and when inflation rate was super high, and they were like, yeah, so our inflation component of the salary increases this year is going to still be like 3 or 4% because it's transitory. I'm like, yeah, but the damage is done. It's going to be permanent.
Yeah.
It's but not like we're going back to normal. It's not like I'm going to change their mind as a second year staff.
Yeah. You can't really win that argument. And I mean, we all want to like hope that they're arguing in good faith, but then that also like calls into question their competence.
You would hope what I mean? They would know that they're either trying to trick people or they don't know what they're doing.
So that's the sad situation you're in. Either the people in charge of you are evil or grossly incompetent. And we seem to be running into that a lot these days.
Or a third option, they just can't afford to actually pay the increases.
So, but they're lying to you.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. But they might not be evil. It just might be the only way they can make ends meet as a business is to not pay that increase.
Yeah.
And then you have right here, 2021 to 2024, 21%.
Yeah. So 2021 inflation was 7%, and then it went down over the next several years. But from 2021 to 2024, the inflation was almost 22%.
Yeah, across the
because
board.
It just stacks on itself. So like as Nick was saying, with like transitory, that word that they were using, the rate is going down, but inflation is still going up over time.
Yeah. So when they tell you that, that's kind of like giving a lollipop to someone with cancer. You know, it's already over.
Yeah.
You're just trying to make them feel better.
It's a good analogy.
It might be a bit extreme, but that's how I feel about it. And then we have some real wages here, median wages, right? So this is not average. It's just like kind of like people in the middle of the economy. This is what they're making. So we have weekly average, and it's like the peak was quarter two of 2020 with roughly almost $400 a week is the median wage, which is pretty tough because, you know, that's less than $2,000 a month that people are like bringing home, and I don't even think that's after tax. You know, I think that's just what
That's the median wage?
as of 2020.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So, and then it's actually
That's
lower.
got to include like, 'cause
actually
that's
lower
20,000
now.
a year, right? Yeah. Yeah.
That's below minimum wage. There's no way the median is below minimum wage.
Well, that's got to include people who are probably either unemployed or not in the workforce.
It says employed full-time median usual weekly real earnings.
Oh, so that's compared. So that's probably based on like 1982 or something.
Yeah, it's from the Fred, so it's like, it's a good source. Bureau of
Yeah.
Labor
So
Statistics.
so that's real dollars, not nominal dollars.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more, Nick?
Yeah. So real dollars is like they take a base year, which we'll talk about how the base year keeps changing.
1982. Right
Yeah.
now? Okay.
Yeah. So you're making $400 in 1982 terms, not in today's terms. So
Okay, so that
once you
makes sense.
multiply it by
Then
the,
it's like 60,000 a year, which
Yeah.
is actually the median's around 50 or 60. So that makes more
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's but at the same time, and this is like, you know, the big rage right now is housing costs have increased 1,007% since 1967. So yeah, that data goes back another 20 years. But I think we can be fairly confident in saying that wages have not increased 1,000% since 1967.
no.
Okay. Yeah. So this makes more sense now that Nick explains it that way. So back in 1982, according to the Fred and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, people were taking home $330 a week at the median rate, and then the amount that wages have risen if you take out inflation and just compare it to what money was valued at back then. Now people are taking home at the median like $370 a week. So wages have risen over the past 40 years, like $40 a week, basically, when you take out inflation. Because wages go up over time as efficiency improves and technology improves, but that doesn't keep even with like the increase in expenditures for daily life. You know, like people have iPhones now. Like there's all these different things that people have to pay for now that they didn't pay for back then to be a part of society.
Like necessary expenses that, you know, are very different and generally like a higher capital expenditure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is saying that real wages have increased though. So people have a better standard of living now than they did in 1982.
Yeah. Because of technology and efficiency. That's generally what happens over history.
But do they have the same purchasing power, you know? Because I think the dichotomy here is that yes, real wages have increased, but the necessities and stuff have increased far more.
Also, the inflation that this takes into account to kind of like flatten the data is using CPI. So I guess this is probably a good time to go into CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is how we measure inflation versus like other sources, because CPI has some drawbacks. So
this is actually a question I have for you, honestly. If you're like a formally educated person on this, or you're just have a better understanding of why this is, because like I spend a lot of time trying to figure out why they changed the base year, right? So, you know, base year is changed at 1982 to 1984, and that table is based on a 1982 base of 100. What does this mean? A CPI of 195.3, as an example, from 2005 indicates 95.3% inflation since 1982.
Yes.
Okay. And so the that means it's calculated with current year minus base year divided by base year. But they often change the base year. Excuse me. And I was, trying to find out why did they change the base year? And the only answer I could find on Fred, on different like inflation websites and stuff like that, and it's just this phrase. It's kind of like, safe and effective, or like it's just like one of those like recurring phrases. And it was just to keep data current, or keep the index current.
Yeah, because otherwise people would see that since the base year inflation is 35,000%.
Yeah, so it's like that's the insidious argument, right?
Yeah,
but I'm trying to figure out like what is like actually a good reason. I was talking to Nick about this before we started recording. Like, what is actually a reason why they would do this? Is it like significant technological change that affects things, and that's why they're like, oh, the internet started, so we're the economy is totally different now, and therefore we have to change the base year. Yeah. But like I'm like there, I cannot, like, I have not been able to find a good reason like that makes sense to me, at least, as to why you would change the base year. Because to me, looking at it from a cynical perspective, I'm kind of leaning toward what Ted said. It's like if they kept the base year, back in 1913, then it'd be like, holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think that is so people can compare to like a certain time frame. Because if we do like 1910, nobody alive now was alive then. And also like 3,000, like if CPI is 3,200, like that's kind of hard to comprehend. Whereas it's a little easier to say, it's doubled since 1982.
Yeah. But it's also like misleading,
It is, yeah. It can be. I mean, I think as long as you I think that that CPI isn't there to, I think it's there to give people a frame of reference rather than to like explain how bad inflation is.
Yeah. So let's go over CPI, because we've been mentioning it, but a lot of people don't know what it is. So CPI is Consumer Price Index. It basically measures inflation. So it has a basket of different categories for spending for the average person. But for most people that are in like lower income or middle income brackets, the largest portion of their salary is spent on energy and housing
and
food. But CPI doesn't include housing or energy. Does it include food?
So I don't think so. So that's core CPI, and they still do track like housing, food, energy. But the reason that they don't is because I think that stuff is more subject to, so their price changes can be more subject to non-inflationary things. So the example I saw is like if there's a drought, food's going to go up, but that's not because there's inflation. It's because there's a drought.
Or for housing, people nowadays have larger square foot houses, so it would skew the statistic. Is that also why they would not put housing in there?
Potentially. Which I think they should still include that stuff. Like, I think you can parse out, a drought or things like that. I think they should include it. So if people say core CPI, it doesn't include that stuff, but you should really include that in like the total CPI.
Yeah. So CPI is a complicated thing, and it was kind of interesting. While I was doing my my endless Googling and stuff like that, I found this thing called the Chapwood Index. This is the first time I've seen it, but it seems interesting, and it's kind of like, it claims to be like the true inflation, like calculated measurement. And so real quick, I'll just read like its introduction. It says problems with CPI. This is like why it exists. So it says the rate at which prices increase has a profound effect on all of us, but mostly on middle and low income America, like Ted said. While CPI was originally a measure to evaluate a predefined, consistently weighted basket of goods, over time, the basket of goods grew to an unreasonable 80,000 plus items, muting dramatic price changes in common goods and services. By adding too many layers of complexity and algorithms, you lose the organic, real results in a muddled mix of diluted data. Perhaps more dangerous have been the changes in which CPI is calculated and consistently manipulated to keep government expenditures down and mislead the public with misinformation. So ongoing modification of the CPI and the unfortunate consequences. In 1983, the government CPI rose roughly 12%, and the government modified the CPI calculation to save money. In order to save money on salary increases and entitlement benefits which are tied to CPI, the government changed their calculations of the CPI to reflect a much lower number. The statistic underwent another reconfiguration in 95 and 96 with the Boskin Commission. These changes made the CPI an even worse indication of the real cost of living increase. It is estimated between 1996 and 2006, this reconfiguration of the CPI saved the U.S. government over $680 billion. Since then, the government has been artificially deflating the CPI to keep figures as low as possible. The readings you see published today no longer represent the real out-of-pocket expenditures incurred by most Americans. The government's baseline CPI excludes items such as taxes, energy, and food, which are not only necessities, but often a majority of our daily expenditures. The CPI increase from 2019 to 2023 was a total of 18%, average of 4.5%. But our research found that for many cities, the cost of living increase was more than that in 2022 alone.
All right, do we want to go through what the Chapwood Index says inflation has been? Do you have that pulled up?
So right here, for New York City, 2017, 11%, 2018, 12%, first half of 2019, 12%, last half of 2021 to first half of 2022, 18%, 2023, 10%, to an average of 12% per year. Pretty much in the top 10 cities in the U.S.
What about a different city from New York? So take Dallas. I see Dallas is on there. What was Dallas's average per year?
10.
Okay, so we're basically looking at
double
an average of 10% inflation per year instead of the CPI indicator being top of 7% in 2021 and around 3 to 4% most years.
I mean, even like the lowest one, or not the lowest, but almost the lowest with Tulsa, theirs was almost 10% too.
Yeah. So on average in America, you're looking at like 9, 10%, 11%. Whereas in most of the years, you're looking at an average of like 3, 4% according to CPI. So you're looking at about triple what they say inflation is with CPI. Chapwood Index says inflation's been about triple that every year.
Yeah, and CPI is also national, so it's not by city. When people talk about it, and there can be a lot of variation between cities.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, you just look at New York, like what you're paying for, a 700 square foot apartment versus in El Paso. Yeah. Both fairly big cities. El Paso is almost 1 million people. New York is far bigger, but it's still like the difference in the cost of living there is drastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is probably about enough on inflation, and we should go into some isometrics real quick.
Yeah, if you have any other questions on inflation,
or if you can give us a good answer on why the base year changes.
Yeah.
So that I don't have to keep looking into this and go full schizo. That'd be great.
Yeah, maybe we'll bring up the Chapwood Index to our friends over at the Higher Standard, because I haven't heard them mention that before, but they talk about CPI a lot and some of the problems with CPI. All right, moving on to isometrics. Isometrics are really good for building stability and rehabbing injuries and also for hypertrophy. So we'll kind of go into how isometrics work for these different aspects of your training. But first, Nick, do you want to let people know what isometrics are if they don't know what an isometric contraction is?
Yeah. So it's when your muscle is flexed but not moving.
Yeah. So you want to go through example of a bicep curl? Concentric, isometric, eccentric?
I'll try my best. Yeah. So concentric is when the muscle is shortening. And so like you're pulling it towards you, which is, what people think about when they're, going up, like the main part. The eccentric portion is when it's lengthening. And then, in isometric would be when you're like, at like a 90-degree angle and just holding it.
Like a flexed arm hang
or any
something.
angle.
Yeah. Or like a plank, that would be in isometric because you're not moving, but you're flexed.
Yep. All right. So looking at stability. So when we talk about stability, as we recorded an interview with our friend Nick Ridpath. He's a coach here at the gym that Sean and I go to. But as he mentioned in that interview that will come out a couple episodes after this, stability is basically your ability to resist force. So holding a weight in an isometric position is a really good way to train stability. Holding a weight or resisting gravity by keeping your muscle in the same position. So when you train this way with isometrics in tough ranges of motion for you, you are building stability. So for some people, this can mean different things. We can go over a couple different examples, but some common day-to-day areas that people might do isometric contractions and realize, oh, that's actually kind of difficult, is like if you're in your car and you turn around to reach something in the back seat, your muscle in your core, like your obliques or something, or in your back, might cramp up because you're holding that position that you're not very stable in. Does that ever happen to you when you reach back? No?
Has this ever happened to you? Insert the I think you should leave episode. He's like, has that ever happened to you?
So yeah, that's as far as like stability training goes, testing yourself in different ranges of motion, holding a weight or resisting the force of gravity can be a good way to train stability. And when it comes to rehabbing injuries, a lot of time we do that by increasing our stability. So when it comes to rehabbing, a lot of times we want to lower the weight but still get effective tension on the muscle. So there's different ways to do this. One of my favorite ways that is not an isometric contraction, but when we talk about rehabbing or training through injury for like the lower body, if I have a client come in and they have a lot of lower body injuries over time, and they maybe can't do a lot with squatting and hinging and stuff like that, I can always put them on a sled, because if they're pushing a sled, that's just concentric contractions, right? As you're driving the sled forward, there's not really much eccentric happening there. And when it comes to like eccentric contractions, they're really good for hypertrophy. They put a lot of force on the muscle, but also on the joints. So when it comes to like injuries, if you can kind of minimize that eccentric contraction, that can help you progress through an injury and still lift and make progress through an injury that you're dealing with.
Interesting.
So another thing that people will do to reduce the amount of load that they're using while they have an injury is blood flow restriction training, where they're putting like a band or some sort of cuff around like high up on a joint. So you can like put a band around your arm up by your shoulder at the top of your bicep and do bicep curls. And then because it's limiting the blood flow, you'll get like a really good pump, but you don't have to use as much weight.
Interesting.
And so BFR actually pairs really well with isometrics if you're training through an injury. Let's see, as far as, I guess that kind of covers rehab. Moving into hypertrophy with isometrics, and I guess this also applies to rehabbing and stability as well. But you can build strength in tough ranges of motion or end ranges of motion with isometrics. So think like bottom of a squat is a really hard position for people. But if you try holding a weight for 3-5 seconds in the bottom of your squat. You're testing that end range of motion with an isometric. And like maybe you really struggle with butt wink in your squat when you're going up and down and it's causing you back pain. But if you can,
Some people.
I wasn't looking at Nick. So maybe like that's an issue for you. Well, maybe you can just get down into the bottom of a squat with the weight and hold that position so that you're able to be more deliberate with it. And then you're holding that more neutral position of your hips, but you're also loading it in that bottom position. And that will expose you to that position with load. Because that's kind of what we want to do when we're looking at like increasing our potential and strength in an end range of motion. We want to have gradiented exposure to it. Another thing we can look at is shoulder extension. So shoulder extension is going to be, think your elbows going behind your shoulders. So that would look like bottom of bench press or like a seated row at the end of it when your elbows are behind your shoulders. That would be shoulder extension. So if you struggle with shoulder extension, maybe you can't do dips because it hurts your shoulder when you're going down. There's other things that come into play with dips as far as trap and low trap. But as far as like shoulder extension, if that's an issue for you to get into that end range of motion, well, we can train that with isometrics. And this is, especially if you're someone with like a really wide rib cage, this would be good for you because your shoulder blade will have a tougher time moving around your shoulder, which is part of what we want there. If you have a more narrow rib cage, it's a lot easier for that scapula to move around the rib cage. Does that make sense? Because of like the arc that's already there. And then the one that is most applicable to me with like my experiences lifting, this is probably my favorite one, with the low back and hip injuries that I had from Ranger School and rehabbing my back. Like the 45-degree low back extension. Yeah. It's so with that, one of the things I did during my rehab is I would hold weights and be in that back extension position. So I'd be flat, like torso up on that back extension, 45 degree. And I would hold the weight there so that my erectors are getting a lot of work in my low back. But I'm not, at the beginning, it was too painful to really go through flexion. But I didn't have to do the back extension reps by going through that flexion, going all the way down and up on the 45-degree back extension. I could just hold that isometric position, and then I'm working my erectors, but I'm not bringing the joint through that range of motion. And then over time, I would start to do like going up and down, and then from there, incorporating more flexion in the low back. So what it comes down to there is a lot of just like gradient and exposure. And we can talk about that more when we have Dr. Kev on the podcast. But that's like one of the 101 topics of like coming back from an injury.
Yeah, I should probably start doing those because if I actually move on that 45-degree thing, my back is just in so much pain.
Yeah, we got to do that for you then.
But yeah. But I didn't think that I did a lot of isometrics, but I guess I do because like bench press, I do like a lot of like holds for like a few seconds. And then I'll take dumbbells and actually go past where like the normal bench press would stop and hold that for a bit. Same with squat. I'll do like a 1 or 2 count hold at the bottom.
So that's if a lot of people think isometrics, like a dead hang for 30 to 60 seconds. You don't have to do that long for an isometric. We can be talking about 3, 5, 10 seconds. So like, any kind of powerlifting training where you're doing like a pause rep, that's also an isometric.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume that like, is there a certain point where like the ROI on your isometric exercise like caps out, Yeah,
it's like anything else. So like,
I'm saying like 5 seconds versus 10 seconds, like
let's take the back extension, for example, we were talking about. So, maybe at the beginning I was doing reps of 5 seconds and then I progressed to reps of 10 seconds. So I'm not increasing the weight. My progression there is time under tension. So then I get to 10 seconds, and then I get to 30 seconds. Okay, well, now I can increase the weight and go back to 10 seconds. So you're just progressing through different variables. Depending on the exercise, it's going to look a little different, you know. Like a back extension, you're holding your hips and your low back in different positions for a lot longer than like a bench press. Like you're usually not in a 127 hours scenario where you need to hold up a rock for like 3 minutes. So for like the bench press, it might not make as much sense to do something like that for longer periods of time. Whereas a back extension, or like a dead hang, maybe you do train that to a minute for that. So it kind of depends on the exercise and the adaptation for how long an isometric is going to give you good returns. But then just like anything else, like once you progress through that time under tension, you can then increase like weight or reps or sets and bring that down back to the beginning of that time under tension range.
Okay, that makes
sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you learned something from that episode. I certainly didn't. No, I'm kidding. I did.
This was a good episode. I think we all learned a decent amount, which is we always like to do when we're putting the outlines together. We enjoy like learning from each other because we all have different areas of expertise. So.
Yeah. Well, feel free to hit us up with any questions, and if you can figure out why the base year changes, let me know, because I'm going to be trying to figure that out for the foreseeable future.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.